What's up, everyone? I'm Harrison. That's Josh, and this is the Awkward Sports Podcast. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers pick up a Week 1 win, 37-20 over the Washington Commanders on home turf. Josh, a great way for the Bucs to start the season. Again, their fourth straight season opener where they pick up a win, the most in franchise history. Not totally surprised knowing the Bucs history that that's the record and that it's happening now. But hey, this is one of the better runs we've seen in the team's history, so you're going to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, a lot of credit to Todd Bowles, right? What he's been able to do taking over as a head coach. I have been very pleased with his success at finding play callers for the offense. You saw Dave Canales last year. You're seeing Liam Cohen to start this season. The Bucs have found this newfound stability, something the franchise has not been used to throughout their history since 1976. And again, the biggest takeaway from this game, Harrison, is Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. He's still as great as he's
Absolutely.
been. And it's been just a joy to watch this guy continue to just dominate the way he has since he walked into the league.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at Mike Evans' stats for those who might have missed the game. 2 touchdown catches, 61 receiving yards, and that first touchdown in particular barely gets over the cornerback's head, and he's just able to pull it in the far left corner to pick up the touchdown. Having the broadcasters going absolutely nuts for those who are able to listen to the call. Look, he's one of those guys where obviously it's not a deep pass, but any vertical shot, he's going to make one of the best plays you've seen in the game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what he's been able to do just throughout his tenure, and that touchdown was very, it was a very very impressive play just from the fact that the corner is draped all over him. He's able to fight him off while staying focused and keeping his eyes on the ball and bringing that one in. But one of the things, Harrison, I was looking at heading into this season was how certain players were going to emerge or how certain players' roles were going to change with the change of the new offensive coordinator, that being Liam Cohen, that we've already mentioned earlier in the podcast. But you look at a guy like Chris Godwin. I said this before coming into this offseason. Last year, he struggled in Canales' system. Again, Canales was a great OC, but it just wasn't really a fit for Chris Godwin. He had over 80 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. We could see a reemergence of him this year to another level, what we kind of saw earlier on in his career last year. Again, not a terrible year by any means for him, but I think his role is going to be larger this year. You saw Rachaad White do a lot more in the passing game. He had about over 60 receiving yards. Very dynamic player out once he gets in space. But Bucky Irving was averaging like 6 yards a carry on the ground. Rachaad White kind of struggled behind that offensive line in the running game department. So you look at those different things. I look to see a larger role for Rachaad White in the passing game. Obviously, Chris Godwin is getting a bigger role again. And now Bucky Irving might be the guy to be the true tailback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of good changes in this offense. But again, Baker looks sharp. The Bucs dropped over 30 points. And of course, even not only Bucky Irving, the rookie, getting in on the action, but Jalen McMillan had a big touchdown there as well. So already loving to see some of these new rookies making an immediate impact. And this just is a great way to start. Couldn't be a better way to start for the Bucs to start the season.
Absolutely. And one of the good things about the rookies coming in, and we haven't even talked about the offensive line yet, because we have a new rookie center there, but there's just been a lot of roster turnover the last couple of years. It's not really the same team apart from a handful of guys anymore who are part of that Super Bowl championship team. And this was only about 4 years ago now in 2020. And now we're starting to see a whole new faces. You would think, okay, they went in for a couple of years, kept that squad together to try to go win a Super Bowl, and then you thought the run would be over. But so far, they've managed to continue to keep it going. And a lot of it is credit to Jason Licht being able to go in and just hit on some of these rookie picks.
Absolutely. And there were a few takeaways from this game. Obviously, you're talking about some of the rookies. Obviously, it felt like Baker Mayfield had more time to work with back there. But I also wanted to focus in on something that I think is a really positive takeaway from this week 1 win. You looked at, obviously the team they played, the Commanders, had a rookie quarterback coming in. Like I said, it was going to be like a welcome to the NFL type game for him. Todd Bowles is a master schemer on defense, and Jane Daniels hasn't had any experience facing NFL level defenses for in real action and for the regular season. So that was one of those kind of games where it was like the Bucs had a really good chance to win. They were at home and they took care of business. But one main thing that I wanted to take away that I think is really important here was Elijah Cansey was out for this game. We did not know that coming in until very, very shortly before the game. He's going to be a key player for this Bucs team as the season goes on. Logan Hall was also out, so the Bucs were very thin at the defensive tackle position, and it didn't seem to bother them that much, which is very encouraging. The other thing is on defense, they didn't create any turnovers, yet they still held Washington to 14 points and then a garbage time touchdown, which gave Washington over 20. But again, no, they didn't force any turnovers and still were a dominant defensive unit. That's very encouraging as well, because throughout the course of the season, this Bucs defense is going to force their turnovers, their fair share of turnovers. So those couple of things they can definitely improve on. From the offensive side of the ball, they didn't turn it over at all. So that's a really good thing. You got to continue to keep that going because when you play teams like next week, the Bucs play the Detroit Lions. We just saw how dominant they were against the Rams in the Sunday Night Football game. So you look at how good the Lions are. You're going to have to take care of the ball there as well. So it's a really good start. Really, very few things to complain about for sure. What a great start from the Bucs.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about the offensive line for a moment, especially with the addition of center Graham Barton. I almost said Kate and Graham Barton. Baker Mayfield was only sacked one time the entire game. Usually the O-line for the Bucs has been a problem the last couple of years because of injuries, players retiring. And again, we know Washington's not the best team. They were, in position to go get Jayden Daniels at second overall, but that's beside the point. This was a team that last year had those same issues against some pretty beatable teams. And this time they showed improvement just in week 1 in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, hey, and again, like they got up to a great start. You mentioned the 4 straight years of opening season wins. They've made the playoffs. They've won the division. They made the playoffs the last 3 years. So it's like, yeah, the Bucs have found the stability, and it's been really exciting overall. And again, Baker Mayfield a really strong start to the season. But again, the question now for the Bucs is, can they take that next step? Right? We've seen them now be able to beat those teams that are supposedly not as talented or as prepared as they are going into games. When they are the better team, they've started to figure out how to win those games, where in the past they have lost to teams that maybe they should beat. And now it's about beating the very good teams, the ones that do contend for the Super Bowl. And that's why you paid Baker Mayfield the money. That's why you locked up Tristan Wirfs for another long-term deal. That's why you paid Antoine Winfield and brought back Mike Evans. So that's the next step for the Bucs, winning the division, making a deeper run into the playoffs, and maybe now beating teams you're not supposed to beat, since they seem to have a good grasp on beating teams that they are supposed to beat.
Absolutely. And kind of looking back at the schedule for teams that you might be able to finally get a statement win against. They play Detroit again this year. They play the Eagles again this year. Now they'll play Kansas City on the road. Can they beat New Orleans at home? It feels like that's almost a cursed game for them the last few years. You go into New Orleans, the Bucs have had no problem most of the time winning the last couple of years, but I swear, ever since Brady came to the team, offense just dies when the Saints are on the field.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was actually blown away with how the Saints played this week. I thought they would be the worst team in the division, and they not only beat the Panthers, but they absolutely rolled them. I know it's week 1, but like I didn't foresee the Saints being one of the highest scoring teams in the NFL, even despite them playing the Panthers. We talked about the Panthers front four and how much they've supposedly improved, and obviously we're very familiar with Dave Canales now going over to Carolina and now trying to coach up Bryce Young, former #1 overall pick out of Alabama. So very shocked that that was the outcome of that game. So the Saints could pose a tougher test to the Bucs than I originally thought. But hey, it's a good start considering that many people have the Falcons winning the NFC South and the Bucs to start their season 1-0 and the Falcons start their season 0-1 with their loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So again, you have a win, you're a game up on the Falcons. Saints might be a tougher test, but right now, 1 week in, there's nothing to overreact about. It's a good start, and they're in the driver's seat again to take control of the division.
Absolutely. And I just want to get your thoughts on the upcoming schedule. Just, I want you to pick one statement win and one trap game.
Ooh, those trap games. You talk about teams. Remember the Bucks going in, winning these games that they're supposed to win. You look at this upcoming schedule. You know what? I actually have one right off the cusp here. The trap game, it could be a couple weeks from now. You look at the Denver game. It's at home. You think you're supposed to win that game. Sean Payton comes in, very familiar with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, former Saints head coach. He's gone against the Bucs a number of times. He's got his rookie quarterback, Bo Nix. Maybe Bo Nix has that type of game. Like you go back to when Daniel Jones came into Tampa and had that crazy game, and the Giants were able to beat the Bucs, and many people didn't think that the Giants were going to be able to do that with Daniel Jones at the helm. So Bo Nix, Denver Broncos coming into Tampa, that could be that trap game for sure. A statement win, you kind of look at, who the Bucs have down the stretch of this season. Let's go to November, right? The 49ers come to town. 49ers have had their long history of, success, but they've also had their long history of injuries and players, holding out. They've had some off the field stuff, distractions going on. Who knows if that's going to settle down by November for them? It very well could. But again, San Francisco's got to come all the way over to Tampa. They're a West Coast team. Again, I think the game currently is slated for a 1 o'clock kickoff, but they could flex it. But if it is a 1 o'clock kickoff, that's like a 10 a.m. start time for San Francisco. So statement win, Bucs beat the San Francisco 49ers. It's an early one for them. And then the trap game could be the Denver Broncos game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that one. Just, with the 49ers game from last year, wasn't pretty. I also think the Bucs might be out for a little bit, payback, like, okay, you smacked us in front of your home crowd. Now we're gonna return the favor. Man, can you imagine just if you're the Bucs and you find a way to lose to Sean Payton again, but this time just with a different team?
Hey, I mean, it's one of those games that you have to get up for too, because it's like you look at that roster, and obviously if you put the rosters on paper, the Buccaneers have the roster. But again, Sean Payton being a really stout offensive coach, Todd Bowles is going to have to bring his best game plan. It's not like Bowles is going to have a game plan that's going to confuse Sean Payton. He's seen virtually everything. He's been coaching this league for a long, long time. So again, you're going to have to be able to play your best. You have to take care of the ball, but ultimately, it's just a game you can't just forget about just because. Oh well, we took care of an early game. We looked really good against Washington, and then the Broncos may be more of the same. You can't just expect that. So that's where they got to be on the lookout for a potential upset there.
Absolutely. So I definitely agree with the statement win for San Francisco, but I'm just going to quickly make the prediction of the trap game to be the Chargers.
Ooh.
I'm sticking in the AFC. This one on the road. Just because, look, the Chargers were absolute garbage last year. I know they have a new head coach with Jim Harbaugh. Herbert's was not great in the opener against the Raiders, but it seems like one of those where the Bucs might go in thinking, okay, easy road win, and then kind of like Bo Nix, like you said, Herbert just kind of ends up having the one good game of the year, and they're just able to just edge one out.
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're coming from. I think that's going to be a tougher test, and that's why I'm not so sure it's going to be a trap game per se, because I think by that point in the season, we're going to be looking at the Chargers as a real team. And the reason why I say that is, to your point, the Chargers were really bad last year. You look at the upcoming schedule for them, they play the Panthers. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a win for them. They play the Steelers, the Cardinals, the Broncos, the Saints, the Browns, the Titans. All of those teams looked uninspiring this week to start the season. And I know it's only week one, but if week one is a theme for this season, if week one is a theme for a lot of these teams, the Chargers could have like 8 or 9 wins with a very few amount of losses on their schedule. You look at their coach being Jim Harbaugh, their quarterback being Justin Herbert, going on the road to Los Angeles. That could be more of a game where it's like the Bucs or more so underdogs at that point in the season. I could very well see that as well. But regardless of how you look at that game, I think we both can agree that's not going to be a game that the Bucs can definitely take lightly.
Definitely not. So the Bucs will be back on Sunday. They head to Detroit, a team that they lost to at home 20-6. We will see how that pans out. Moving on to the Florida Gators. They pick up what might be their only win of the year. They beat Samford 45-7. Definitely a better defensive showing than a couple of years ago when they gave up 52 points and needed over 70 to win. No, at least this time it does look like a football score, 45-7. DJ Lagway makes his first college start, with Graham Mertz being in concussion protocol. Went 18 for 25, 456 yards for 3 touchdowns. I know he went and beat up an FCS team, but it got to be a good confidence booster, at least see the true freshman go in and have a good day. Even if Billy is completely cooked, whoever is thinking they might be the next head coach of the University of Florida is looking at Lagway and thinking, I got a quarterback here ready to go.
Yeah. This guy, again, they played Samford, which low key, I was kind of worried about considering the last time Florida gave up 53 points. And I'm like, well, the defense hasn't gotten much better. And I know this offense isn't going to be capable of scoring 70 this time. But yes, to your point, football score, Lagway was sensational. I think it was the ideal circumstance for him to come in and get a first start in college against an FCS program at home to just kind of get comfortable at the new level. And he looked more than ready to take the big stage. Obviously, Florida had an ugly loss to start the season. You come in at home, this fan base is already, very much so frustrated with how the season is going, borderline uninspired. You got to give the fan base something to be excited about when there wasn't a whole lot to be excited about. He started out 6 for 6, 100% completions. He threw for over 450 yards. And some of these, and it's not like these were just like little screen passes that were going the distance. He was under some pressure and he was throwing some absolute dimes in coverage. Like you couldn't place these passes any better. There's already a lot to like, and it's crazy to me how Florida has somebody of this caliber, and it's just like he's like the answer. I mean, he is a stellar QB, and like, how do you not take what you've seen and now be like, all right, let's trot him back out there against some SEC competition and now see what he can do against some of the big time programs that they're going to have to face. Because we talked about this schedule. It's a gauntlet. I think you got to roll with him, Harrison.
It's going to be tough to see. I think at least for the next week, if Mertz is ready, they're going to go back to him. I'm not saying that's the best decision. That's just what I think happens. But I feel like at the very least, Lagway has proven he can at least take on a bigger role week in and week out, regardless of who is technically the starting quarterback. But hey, if Mertz comes back in and he doesn't perform well, he might just lose his spot, which happens sometimes. He could be Drew Bledsoe, that can happen. And also, I happened to look at the stats. I completely forgot about this. This is the Gators' first win since October 14th of last year.
Yeah.
When they came back to beat South Carolina?
Yeah. Is there something about being a coach at University of Florida where you just don't know what route to take when it comes to the quarterback position? I mean, let's go back post Urban Meyer immediately. Will Muschamp had guys like Trey Burton and Jordan Reed playing quarterback at times. I mean, those guys went on to be NFL tight ends. Tyler Murphy. You look at Dan Mullen had Emory Jones going in over Anthony Richardson. I mean, Billy Napier has had Anthony Richardson, and now he's got DJ Lagway, and he's had Graham Mertz, and like they're not winning games. And it's like, to me, it's like you got to play the best guys. To your point, yeah, he's probably going to go back to Mertz, but could you imagine what the fan base is going to do, how the fan base is going to react if they go back to Mertz and they start losing badly again? Like, I don't know if he's got that long of a leash to make that call if he wants to remain the coach here at University of Florida.
I don't know how much that even matters.
Oh, it does. It does matter because if you're
the reason I say that is because, like, even if he starts Lagway and then you lose to A&M, he might just be done already.
Well, yeah, if you lose, the point being here is if you lose, you're probably going to be done anyway. But what we've seen from these quarterbacks is it looks like Lagway could give this team the best chance to win. And if you don't play Lagway and you play Mertz and lose, then people can say, well, maybe we could have won had we played Lagway. We wouldn't know unless we actually did. At least if you played Lagway and lost, well, it's like, okay, well, our coach recognizes, to play the best guys, regardless of how long they've been in college, and they still lose. And then it's just like, well, our coach isn't really the answer. You got to get Lagway the right guy. But if you go with Mertz, when you have a guy like DJ Lagway waiting in the wings and seeing the flashes that we've seen from him, and they lose, then you have that, well, you may actually have better players to give you that chance to win, and you're not using them. Kind of the same criticism that Mullen got when he was playing Emory Jones.
Or maybe you can also make the argument as well when Mullen was just not giving Damian Pierce a lot of carries, despite the fact he was making an impact on the 10 he would have a game. No, that's a very good point for sure. I was just kind of piggybacking the idea of, I think Napier's just cooked either way. What you described makes it even worse and definitely does accelerate the firing process.
It does.
So maybe Lagway just starts at this point just because Billy's trying to save his job. Mertz had a bad game against Miami. Lagway had a good game against Samford. Are those equal? Are those, on equal footing? Absolutely not. But you can use the good-looking numbers as an excuse to say, let's give it a try.
And you also have to play the quarterback that can strengthen, that can overcome the limitations, right, of what the offense is. We've talked about this. We can agree that Florida's offensive line is not very good. It's not. And Graham Mertz, he's a good thrower of the football. We know that. But he's a pocket guy, and the pocket ain't there. You can't be a pocket guy with no pocket, and that's the problem. Lagway can scramble. He can take those hits. He can run. He's somebody that can overcome maybe in a lesser of a pocket and extend plays outside of the pocket, something that Mertz I don't think does as well, even though he has his own qualities that are very good if you give him the pieces to succeed.
Absolutely. So what to really make of the Gators at this point, really? Are we really just at this point watching just the team for the next head coach come together? Does that make sense?
All right, so let's do this really quickly. Let's just say we do. Let's just say Lagway is here because he spoke at the post-game press conference.
Yeah. And let's assume he doesn't just dip out because they get rid of Napier.
Right. And it's like, why are you a Gator? And he's like, well, Napier, of course, but also the fan base have had my back since I've been here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just say you get to keep Napier. You get to keep Lagway, rather. Who would you, in an ideal situation, want coaching DJ Lagway for the remainder of his tenure?
Me?
Yeah.
My gut goes straight to Lane Kiffin. Like, I know he hasn't had, like, a Lagway type quarterback at Ole Miss, but just to have him plugged into that high-powered offense that he can produce really has me intrigued. And you know what? Just because we saw CJ Stroud at Ohio State, and theoretically, let's go with like Ryan Day. Like, I don't think like I know it's a joke. Oh, they're gonna fire him if he loses to Michigan again. But let's just say that
No,
hypothetically.
I don't even think it's a joke. I think that's actually serious. Ohio State will move off of him if he loses to Michigan again.
Okay, fair. I guess you're right. In a situation like that, like that's the one game a year you play for. It's not like in the SEC where you have a million rivals. Now, I'm not saying there aren't a bunch of rivals in the Big Ten too, but like for those two teams specifically, it's like there are 11 other games you play as a tune-up to that one. So
Yeah.
I'll give you that one as valid. But just because of the quarterbacks I have seen play at Ohio State as of late, I wouldn't mind seeing him too. What about you?
Yeah, I would say there was a rumor out there floated that in this one I was very intrigued with. Do you let Meyer be the interim coach for the rest of the season?
I didn't want to say Urban Meyer. I
But
knew
hear
you
me out.
would bring him
Hear me
up.
out. Hear me out. Urban Meyer being the interim for the remainder of the season.
Okay, an interim I can get behind.
So for the remainder of the season, Meyer has got the reins. And then you see what comes out of that, right? You don't, and if you like what you see, if he somehow turns this thing around and rattles off a ton of wins that we're not supposed to get with the roster that we have, then maybe you do talk extension. But if you don't, then you look next offseason to a guy like Lane Kiffin, or to even a guy. There was a rumor that said they would look at a guy like Lane Kiffin or even a Lincoln Riley. So it's like, hey, I'm on board with that completely. But at the end of the day, this all stems back to how I feel about Billy Napier. You gotta win games. I mean,
I agree.
If Will Muschamp can win games with tight ends playing quarterback, if Dan Mullen can win games playing Felipe Franks over Kyle Trask and playing Emory Jones over Anthony Richardson, and Jim McElwain can win games with Luke Del Rio and Trayon Harris at quarterback, you got to be able to win games with Anthony Richardson, who, by the way, looked incredible in the Week 1 Sunday game against the Texans, and now DJ Lagway and a guy that we all have really gotten a stamp of approval of in Graham Mertz. He hasn't been winning with arguably the best QB room. So at the end of the day, Napier is the coach right now, and he's got to win these games. But if not, that's the route I'd go. Meyer interim, and then look at either a Lincoln Riley, Lane Kiffin, in the offseason if the Meyer experiment doesn't work out. If it does, you take that and run with it.
I can get behind the idea of him being an interim for sure. I'm more just worried that you're going to have a situation where you bring him back in because of that, Tebow era nostalgia, and it doesn't work as well. Yeah, I know the roster is nowhere near as half as good as what they had between '06 and '08, or I guess '09 too, because that was also a year where Tebow and Hart, all of them were still there. But you get my points. It's if it doesn't work out, then you can think about, okay, well, Meyer's reputation nowadays would really creep in compared to in the past. It's tough to say. Like, you get my point. I'm worried it's going to be a nostalgia decision that backfires. Not that it can get much worse, but you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I see it, and I think that point is valid if we're talking like Meyer's the next coach, like through and through, because you can always play the card. Well, he's just here, like as an interim guy, and you're then that I feel like all goes away where it's like, okay, let's say it backfires. Well, he was never going to be the long term answer anyway. He was just here to kind of pick up the pieces, type of thing, and then you're not in a long term bad looking situation.
Hey, if it's a one-off game before Meyer